Allan, it's good to see you again and looking forward to having another chat with you. The
Yeah.
last time we talked, you were at Theological College.
Yes.
I want to find how that experience went for you and then how you moved from Theological College into the ministry itself.
Right. So I graduated in June of '86 and started in the Free Church College in October '89, and I was there for 3 years. I remained in Glasgow and travelled back and forth each day. There was a group of us, and we would get the train from Glasgow Central Station, we'd get the 7 o'clock train through to Edinburgh, and usually be back home by about 6 o'clock. The 3 years, they went by fairly quickly. In some ways, I enjoyed my time at university more than I did at seminary. I think it was maybe because you ended up, and this is what you had to be careful with, the temptation was to begin to treat scripture just like an academic thing rather than the spirituality as well. The one thing that I will say that I had, all the professors were excellent, don't get me wrong, they were all excellent. During the 3 years I was there, they'd introduced a system whereby as a student you would have to, for part of the summer, go to a congregation that needed supply, that didn't have full-time pastor, spend some time there just for experience and so on. And I ended up 2 of the summers in a place called Ardnamurchan. Ardnamurchan Point is the most westerly point of the British mainland.
Wow.
It's in the back of beyond. It's a single track road. Once you venture to get out of Ardnamurchan, you're talking about a 25-mile journey in a single track road with passing places. And it was Douglas MacMillan. This was his home territory. He'd been a shepherd there before he started studying for the ministry. And it was Douglas who basically wanted me to go there. So for 2 summers I was there. Alison was with me. We had some lovely memories. It was a great experience. There were lovely people, and the Sunday involved 3 services, and you were involved. It was 75 miles travel, single track road, and in the summer the roads were busy. So it was a good pastoral experience. Sometimes Douglas, a couple of times he came up on holiday and he'd be there in the congregation checking me out, so that was an experience as well. But overall, seminary, it was good. As I say, maybe it was just because there were other things. It was different to what I expected, but I have to say that the teaching we got was first class.
That experience, both at seminary, which is difficult, I was challenged by my own seminary experience, but the opportunity to go into congregations during the summer, it was really enjoyable, those type of dealing with people, and you tend to find that the congregation is welcoming to a student minister, that the people are kind, they're gracious, they're encouraging, and they're compliments. Was that your experience?
Yeah, very much so. These were, country people, shepherds, and so on, and just delighted to have someone. And no doubt, at times when you look back and you go, oh, poor people, how did they sit under what I was saying or doing? But there was never a negative word. It was all positive. And it was nice. It really was. Most encouraging. I gave you a little foretaste just of what would be involved.
You moved then from college into the ministry. How did that come about, that transition? I mean, was it straight into a pastorate?
Yeah, I ended up on 2 calls. One was to Ardnamurchan. They wanted me to go back to be their pastor, and Douglas wanted me to do that. And the other one was to a place called Dunblane. I'd been there in the January of '89 for the first time, and was asked back a couple of times. And then the word came when I was nearing the end of my final year that they wanted to call me after I came out of seminary. Prayed about it, as you would do, and then I'm a great believer in sanctified common sense, and basically wrote down a list of pros and cons, not just immediate pros and cons, but even further down the road, as say children get older and so on, would affect us as a family. The thing that made me nervous about Dunblane was it was what they called an extension, an outreach charge rather. It had been started a number of years previously. The then minister of Dunblane Cathedral, he had encouraged Fergus MacDonald, who was in Cumbernauld Free Church at that time, to begin an outreach work in Dunblane, which was quite unusual. And they started an outreach work. Then their first pastor was an American, Reverend Ken Larder. Ken was there for 3 years. Then he got a call to 10th Presbyterian. Ken had been a male nurse before he'd entered the pastorate. And at that time, in '88, 10th Presbyterian in Philadelphia were starting a ministry to AIDS victims. And Ken had gone over and been interviewed and asked them to come over and to begin that work, which he did. So that left Dunblane vacant. They were vacant for about a year. And then August the 25th, '89, I was ordained and inducted to Dunblane Free Church of Scotland. As I say, we would meet in the local primary school, in the school library, and that's what we did. It was different, it was challenging. Dunblane is a place, when people would hear that you lived in Dunblane, Scotland, 9 times out of 10 they would say, "Oh, Dunblane," because it was considered quite a rich community, very much a commuter community as well, because it is so central in Scotland. So a lot of people, companies put their executive salespeople in Dunblane, and it gave them easy access to the likes of motorways, highways, and so on, to various parts of the UK. So because of that, the wealth of the place, that brought its own peculiarities. But we were 4 years. We worshipped in the elementary school. And during that time, a building on the main street came up for sale, and the Extension Committee in Edinburgh, they met with us. We bought it, and then we put an upper level on it, and that became our church building. And that was a blessing, because when you would go around the doors doing outreach work in Dunblane, people would say, "Oh, and where do you worship?" And we would say, "Well, in the primary school." And immediately you could see the cogs turning, as though, oh, you're a sect or something, because the building was, considered very much to be something that was necessary if you were to be considered a mainstream church. I suppose the thing that will always, for ourselves as a family, but for those of the Dunblane congregation at that time, that will always be in our memory is the time of the Dunblane massacre. In fact, the anniversary, in God's providence, the anniversary was March the 13th, 3 days ago, and that was when a gunman, Thomas Hamilton, basically killed 15 children, shot them, and their teacher. In fact, the teacher, she was the librarian. It was that library room that we would hold our services in. So that was devastating to the community, and it caused my own family, our middle girl, Chloe, she ended up having terrible problems. Our children didn't go to the Dunblane Primary in God's providence the way it worked out. They went to a little school in a place called Kinbach, which was 3 miles away. But Chloe, we were having terrible problems. She was having nightmares. What was happening with a lot of the children in Dunblane, they were having alopecia, hair loss, and so on. And the doctors in the area said it was basically just the trauma of that situation. And we discovered later that a lot of folks throughout the Free Church were actually praying at that time that we would get moved out of Dunblane, because they knew, they'd heard the effect it was having on the family. So it was comforting to know that people were remembering us in prayer. Now, 7 years in Dunblane. The funny thing is, the beginning of the 7th year, I did have a feeling this would be my last year. It's hard to give any hard and fast reason, but it often came into my mind, you will be leaving Dunblane. And I believe that was God, through His Word and other things, speaking. The Dunblane ministry, the unique factor about it is, and as I've discovered in Toronto now after 24 years, as I said, it was a commuter town. People would be there for 4 or 5 years, and then on the basis of their work, they would have to leave and go elsewhere. And we would constantly, within a year, be building up number-wise, and then all of a sudden, numbers would leave. And it wasn't through any trouble, and within the congregation. It was because people were having to move on with their work.
Yeah, that was quite a challenging situation. Well, we've covered there your time at the Theological College, the experience you had in your summer internships, and your first pastorate with the challenges that were there. Yeah. So next time we'll pick up the move from Dunblane after the 7 years and Toronto. So we'll talk again.
Okay, bye Andrew. Thank you.